or that. So whatever we do here, you can definitely, most of the drugs, I don't even know them offhand myself, but we're gonna use like, you can go through them on first aid to know specific names. But I want us to pay attention to mechanism of action. So hopefully whatever we lay down today in class, right, will allow you to understand more how those drugs works and better manipulate autonomic nervous system questions, which is integrated with neuro as well as cardiovascular system. Yes. All right. So sharing my screen. And yeah, just a little bit. So we're going to start with organization first. Just a little bit of anatomy that we should take away, and then we look at the function, then pharmacology, medications. So we're going to look at sympathetic separately first, and then we'll look at parasympathetic, right, nervous system. If you look at sympathetic nervous system in terms of organization or anatomy, so the first thing we're going to talk about will be, well, I mean, there should be origin, right? Where do the sympathetic nervous systems originate from? We're going to talk about how they are a little bit organized, just to give you an overall picture. Yeah, what to think about. So the first thing is if you look at the spinal cord here, so the cell body for the preganglionic sympathetic fibers originates in the spinal cord. They usually come from the intermediolateral, right, nuclei. So let's say this is the spinal cord. We have the dorsal column and the dorsal part here. We have the anterior part of the spinal cord. Yeah. So the shaded area is the gray matter, where you have mostly cell bodies, and then we have the white matters outside the columns. So this location here, right, intermediolateral nuclear. So there are, along the whole spinal cord, right, you have those locations, intermediolateral nuclei. So basically that is where the cell body for the preganglionic neurons are located for sympathetic nervous system. And it originates from what? From the level of T1 all the way to about the lumbar, right, region L2. So all the intermediolateral nuclei from T1 to L2, they contain the cell body for sympathetic. So from here, what happens? We have sympathetic nerve, right? Preganglionic sympathetic neuron. We can originate here. And so the distance. So remember, so we're coming from the spinal cord, right? We want to get to visceral organs. We want to go to the skin. We want to, distribute these fibers everywhere. The distance from the spinal cord to those organs is very, very far. So which means you need what? Relay systems. We need ganglions that will relay the information from the preganglionic neurons, right, to the organs through the postganglionic neurons, right? So there are so many ganglions in the sympathetic nervous system, right, that help with this relay, but we should know a few, right, high yield ones. The first one we should know will be what? The paravertebral, right, ganglion. So there are a bunch of cell bodies, right, that are arranged very, very close to the spinal cord itself. We call them paravertebral sympathetic ganglia. And then you're gonna see, and you've heard about this ganglia as well, like celiac ganglia. We're gonna talk about how they're different, celiac ganglia. You also have the sympathetic superior mesenteric ganglion. We're gonna have the inferior mesenteric ganglion. So in your mind, you're already thinking celiac, superior mesenteric, inferior mesenteric, right? The name correlates with the word, with the name of the vessels that supply the visceral organs, right, in the GIT. Yeah. So which means these ganglia, celiac, superior mesenteric, inferior mesenteric, where do they end up? They end up sending post-ganglionic sympathetic fibers to the GIT. And then the paravertebral ganglia, actually, which runs along, right, the whole from this neck all the way down to the sacrum, runs along the spinal cord, will send signals, right? Postganglionic fibers all the way to the structures in the head, neck, right? To the upper extremity, upper limb, lower limb, to the structures in the thoracic cavity, lungs, heart, everything. Yeah. And then as well as to the structures on the skin. So this is how they organize. So when we say cervical, right, paravertebral ganglia, we're talking about, right, the ganglia that release sympathetic, right, to the head and neck, basically cervical all the way up. The thoracic ones, they're gonna supply to the thoracic organs, heart, lungs, things like that. The ones also in the neck, cervical ganglia, right? You know, remember our brachial plexus, they're going to supply to the upper limb. The lumbar plexus will supply to the lower limb. And then you also have fibers to the skin, right? To maybe the intercostal, right? Arteries, the nerves, sorry, and some other nerves that supply, right? The skin as well. Yeah. But the celiac, superior mesenteric, inferior mesenteric, they're going to supply the GI visceral organs. So the foregut celiac ganglion will supply those. Superior mesenteric, the midgut, the inferior mesenteric, the hindgut. Yeah. There's also a ganglion called hypogastric ganglion, which is supplied the pelvic structures. Yeah. So my point here is, if sympathetic fibers originate, preganglionic originates from the intermediolateral nucleus in the spinal cord, they cannot extend all the way to the terminal organ by themselves. So these fibers have to what? They have to form synapses with cell bodies in paravertebral ganglia, celiac, superior mesenteric, inferior mesenteric, hypogastric, and then these ganglia will now send what? They're going to send postganglionic, right, fibers to the end organ, right? So this would be like the general overview of the sympathetic. The fibers come from the spinal cord to those ganglia, we call them what? The pre-ganglionic, right? Fibers. So pre-ganglion. So these are the ganglia. And then we now have the post-ganglionic, right? Fibers from the ganglia to the end organ. One more structure here that I want to put here will be what? Will be the adrenal medulla. So adrenal medulla also is a form of ganglion because it contains cell bodies controlled by what? By preganglionic fibers coming from the spinal cord as well. But unlike the postganglionic fibers for the other ganglia, which actually extend axons, right, to the end organ, adrenal medulla doesn't do that. What does it do instead? It actually releases what? Epinephrine directly into the blood. Right, doesn't extend, right? Postganglionic, right? Fibers. Yeah. They actually, the cells there, once they're stimulated, they release what? Epinephrine to the blood. So this is the organization of the sympathetic nervous system. Now, let's put more details a little bit. Which neurotransmitter do the preganglionic sympathetic fibers use? The ones coming from the spinal cord to the ganglion. They're going to be using what? They're going to be using acetylcholine. They are cholinergic neurons. While the postganglionic fibers, they use what? They're the ones that will use epinephrine and norepinephrine. This is sympathetic, right? So they're the ones that will use mostly epinephrine and norepinephrine as their neurotransmitters. Yeah. Except what? Except the sympathetic to the sweat glands in the skin, which also be what? Acetylcholine as well. Yeah. But mostly norepinephrine for the postganglionic, mostly norepinephrine actually. Is the adrenal medulla that makes what? Epinephrine. So the receptor for the ganglion cells will be muscarinic receptor. Because acetylcholine will stimulate what? Muscarinic, right? Receptors. So the receptor for the ganglion, so the cells in the paravertebral, celiac, etc., that will be stimulated by the preganglionic sympathetic fibers, they're going to use what nicotinic receptor, neuronal nicotinic receptor to interact with acetylcholine, right, which is an ion channel. The receptors for norepinephrine, right, on the end organs, in the head, neck, upper limb, blah, blah, skin, it is a GI, pelvic, right, it is wherever norepinephrine will end up working, or the postganglion will end up working, will be what? That's why we have the alpha, right, and beta receptors. Yeah. Is this clear so far? Everyone, stay with me.
Yes, Doc, still here.
Yes, Doc. We're here.
You okay, Victoria? Good.
Yep.
Okay. So know the origin, where they're coming from, preganglionic. Know where they're going to end up. That's why we have ganglia. Have an idea of the ganglia that we have and general idea of what they do or where they send fibers to. Know their neurotransmitters for the preganglionic and postganglionic. Know the receptors for the postganglionic, right, cell bodies, which will be nicotinic neuronal. And then for the end organ, right, postganglionic, they're going to work on alpha, right, and beta receptors at the end organ. Except the postganglionic sympathetic that supplies the sweat glands in the skin is actually what? A cholinergic neuron, not adrenergic neuron. So this one we interact with what muscarinic receptors, right, in the sweat glands. Otherwise, the rule is the same. Another separates a little different structure here with what adrenal medulla, which is like a ganglia as well. It's a ganglion rather as well. It has cell bodies which are stimulated by what preganglionic sympathetic neurons in the adrenal medulla. But unlike the other ganglia, they don't extend an axon. They don't have post-ganglionic axon, right, to the target organ. They instead release what? Epinephrine, they're like endocrine glands cells. They release epinephrine into the blood, and then epinephrine circulates and works on right adrenergic receptors, mostly beta receptors. Yeah. So this is sympathetic. Let's look at parasympathetic organization.